Hi, my name's Kara Kavensky, and I am a writer. I contribute to a lot of publications, and I'm honored to be here this evening with Dr. Valerie McCray. She is right here. We're improvising with her iPad, and I hope that you can hear us. Please advise in the comments below. Let me move this. Okay. Thank you.
All right. You know what? We are a all-female crew today. We are making do, and we are doing it all right. We're pulling it together. I'm Dr. Valerie McCray, and I'm running for United States Senate. So great to be here today and get a chance to know you a little bit better. We've got how many more days before election? Eight days. Oh my gosh, 8 days. And I want everyone to see my Kamala shirt. This is this is my favorite. I got this one at the DNC, and so I'm really excited about this. I've been wearing my Kamala shirt today, and you get a lot of stops and stares. Yes, and get a lot of conversations going and thumbs up. And so we got to campaign quite a bit at the mall today just by wearing this shirt. So,
Yes. This evening, because your opponent refuses to debate you, I wanted to ask you some questions so we could get to know you a little bit better.
Perfect. That's great.
So on the addressing Congressman Banks, he is currently assigned to the following congressional committees: the House Armed Services Committee, the Committee on Education and Workforce, and the House Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the U.S. and China. My first question is, which committees would you want to be on, and how would you have addressed what he's done differently? Because he has supported a bill that would eliminate financial assistance for, specifically, it's the Higher Education Act of 1965. He approved an amendment, or supported an amendment, to prohibit graduate medical schools from receiving financial assistance if they adopted certain policies related to DEI.
Yes. Congressman Banks seems to be on some sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, but this sort of grandstanding on this DEI issue, whether it's DEI or whether it's woke policies or anything like that. He grandstands on these issues that make absolutely no sense. You know, we are a DEI world. We're a DEI nation where we come from diverse communities, and DEI stands for what's good: diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that includes everybody. To get a broad range of the people here in the United States. It doesn't make sense to hold up education, any education funding, just so they'll take out any type of DEI specifications. That makes no sense to me. You want your doctors, you want your medical schools to represent the population as a whole. So why wouldn't you want it to look like your medical schools look like the people that they're serving?
Well, and I think that a step beyond that would be physicians trained in the acceptance of other cultures. Just last year, I think the NFL identified that the African American players, they were handling them differently within the NFL, physicians right now.
Absolutely. And with women as well. There's this really false belief, for example, that black people, especially black women, can take more pain, for example. They are learning these things in medical school. And as we try to unravel these things and get equity in healthcare, these type of attacks on DEI, to have doctors say, hey, wait a minute, this person does feel pain, this person does have these issues, and have people that are from different cultures who can listen to what's going on. You know, it's different cultures actually feel things, or they present their issues present a little bit differently. And so to have people from different cultures actually in medical school, that only helps us. So this makes no sense to me. But this is sort of Jim Banks's brand to veto or try to get in the way of anything that looks fair and equitable.
Right. So, which committees would you want to be on? And I want to address some of this, and then I want to dive into your background after that, just to be clear. So, what if you were? Which committees do you think have the most relevance to the state of Indiana and your constituents?
Well, there's one committee, for example, that I would love to be a part of, and that's the Health, Education, and Labor Committee. That that sort of encompass a lot of the things that I find my expertise in anytime you're dealing with health and mental health, and also poverty and wages, and what the labor unions and the labor force need to make sure they stay healthy as well. So anything that has to do with longevity of people and the well-being of people, and also, we don't want people to struggle their whole lives, work their fingers to the bones, and then don't have adequate pensions as well. So we're talking holistic, whole life issues from childhood on up, from birth to to death. We want to make sure that people have what they need.
Well, and okay, so I know I said I wanted to address this first and then jump in. I'm going to disrupt this right now. Let's talk about your background, because it plays right into why you just answered that question the way you did. So I'd like for you to explain your career path and what has brought you to being seated right here, right now.
Yes, that would probably help everyone to make more sense of sort of the stance. I'm a clinical psychologist by trade, and so I've worked with prisons. I catch things. I'm at the sort of that front row seat. I catch things at their lowest point. So I work in prisons. I work with trauma. I work with Stop the Violence. I work with the military with their PTSD evaluations as well. Work with the military. I in service to the military. I have to explain that out because some people hear she's with the military, and I don't want to push that. That's not what's going on there. My service to the military, to support the military, is to be a psychologist and do disability exams. But what that also means is listening to thousands and thousands of war stories in vivid detail. So looking at that trauma piece, the trauma piece with the violence in the communities and sort of the gun violence and the young children we've lost and the kids we've lost because of that. Also all the other mental health issues, the suicide issues across our nation, and especially in the rural areas as well. But working in prisons also gives you an opportunity to see what happens when we don't catch these problems early on, when we don't catch the poverty issues, the domestic violence issues, the incest, the child neglect issues. When we don't catch these things early on and take care of them, we wind up with a system that's overburdened with people that are incarcerated. And most of these people are good people that had crises that they didn't handle correctly.
So what are your suggestions to help preempt these concerns?
You know what? We can go a long way by dealing with the poverty issues. The working your finger to the bone, these low wage issues, that handles a big chunk of it. When people have enough to not only pay their bills, I call these breathable wages, and then not only you pay your bills, but you have room in between these paychecks to actually breathe. I mean, all your tires are good at the same time, for example. Your brakes, front and back, are good. You don't have these bills nagging you, and you've got time to sort of breathe in between. That is what we should expect for every citizen. It doesn't make sense for anybody to work 40 hours a week and still be in poverty. And when you have families that are working 2 or 3 jobs, that means that children are not being monitored properly. It means that they have emotional neglect. Their homework doesn't get monitored. I mean, all these little details, these around the kitchen table conversations don't get a chance to happen when you have people working 2 or 3 jobs. So let's start there with the poverty issues, with the low wages. Indiana has still a $7.25 or is it $7.50? It doesn't matter. It's pretty low. $7.25 minimum wage. It also matches the federal minimum wage as well. I can help on my end when I get to Washington is raise that federal minimum wage to something that's doable for all the citizens. And then Indiana can also, whatever I do in Washington, D.C., that needs to be duplicated here in Indiana. That's something they can do without federal legislation. And most states have done that. Only Indiana, not only Indiana, but it's like 10 states or so that are still with this really low minimum wage. So we can start there. Secondly, we can do something about housing and affordability. Everything is getting out of hand there. That means that people are having to move constantly, and that's stressful in itself, not being able to afford rents. It's just not knowing where you're going to be, where you're going to lay your head. That's problematic. That causes crises that we don't need to have here in the United States. Medical care. I mean, there's so many things. I can go on and on. I'll let you interject because I'll keep talking and you'll think, what happened here? I think she answered all the questions in one big sentence.
Oh, well, what has been your experience with the justice system, and how have you engaged professionally from your perspective with people who are justice involved?
Well, I've worked in jails. I've worked in prisons. As a mental health provider, as a psychologist in these settings, my job is to make sure people have the medications they need, the therapy they need. We also make sure that people are in the safest environment. So we check them in. My staff usually checks them in to make sure that they are, if we see someone that's small or frail or feminine in a male prison, it's like, okay, let's make sure they're in the safest position possible. If we see someone that's in a mental health crisis, we make sure that they have the medications they need. So we we triage them from the beginning. But some of the things that I've seen is, what's clear is that the prisons and jails have become the new mental health hospitals for poor people. And that's unfortunate that we have them captive when we could have taken care of these things in the communities, in better connections with medical health facilities or mental health facilities. And what I'm seeing too is, you see a lot of unfair sentencing, of course. There are differences between how people are sentenced. They're based on their zip code, based on their color, based on the color of their victim, based on whether or not that judge had a good lunch or not. It varies quite a bit. Even with the guidelines, you can see big differences in how the outcomes are played out.
So you've addressed some of the concerns around citizens with the wages. How would you address job creation specifically?
We've got some obstacles that in Indiana we're putting up. We want to create jobs here, but we've got 2 or 3 issues that are really pertinent to this. One, our education system. We are not educating at a level that's keeping up with the new technologies and the new industries that are coming in. Eli Lilly, for example, moved one of their operations, or is opening one of their operations in North Carolina, mainly because of the intelligence pool here, or the education pool here, is not as strong. The talent pool, let me just put it that way, is not as strong here in Indiana.
Yeah, thanks for correcting that.
Yes, I got to correct this. So what I'm talking about is a brain drain. We're losing our educated folks. They're going other places. They're not necessarily coming here. The education system has to keep up. We have to make sure that our children are being educated to the point that they can keep up with the new technology and new businesses that are coming through. That's one thing. Another thing, we don't want to lose young people because of our healthcare system and our lack of healthcare for women, for example. I've talked to young people that said they're afraid they want to have children, but they're afraid to get pregnant here in Indiana. So they're considering other states that they should move to before they start their families, because they're really concerned that if something's wrong with their pregnancy, They won't have the adequate supports here in the medical systems here. And they've got reason to be concerned because over one third of our counties are lacking OBGYN care. We lost a young lady just recently because of a simple ectopic pregnancy that could have been handled. But she had to leave behind a 1-year-old and died because there was no maternity ward where she was that could handle this OBGYN issue. It's too little too late. And that was unfortunate. And I will call her name. It's Tasha Sabaski, and she left a 1-year-old. And that's shameful. And so we're going to lose young people if we don't have people here to make sure that their medical care is safe. So there's a lot of things that with technology, but if we were to really get serious about our education system, if we really get serious about providing medical care for everyone, we could bring major industries here in droves. We are getting some good things here. We're getting some chip manufacturers, some battery manufacturers. A lot of good things are happening, but we could get more. We could have more here in Indiana. So we'll be working towards that.
So you were addressing a bit of the medical and care deserts that
Yes.
exist across the state. How does technology impact making up for some of that? Because obviously not every county has a hospital that's a certain level of trauma to address all of those things, just like you were mentioning this young mom who died because of the lack of care. And I know some women have to drive even a couple hours to the nearest hospital just to give birth.
Right.
So how would you assist at the federal level with helping our state address that?
Well, first of all, we do need to codify Roe v. Wade and make sure that women have a right to choose. And I know this seems like it's not connected, but it's very connected. Because when we don't have protections for women and their choice, what we're doing is losing doctors. They're leaving Indiana. They're not signing up to be OBGYNs in their internships and that sort of thing. We're having doctors to just leave. That don't want to concentrate on OBGYN issues. And that affects all women, not just women at the childbearing ages. That affects women in later life as well. We have women that just need hysterectomies, that have cancer issues. Whether it's ovarian or whatever, they need to be seen. And without these things in place, it's a problem. So all these things are connected with women's choice to choose, because we're losing valuable supports for women's health, period.
Right.
And we're 51% of the population.
52. 52% of the population in Indiana.
Thank you.
So because OBGYNs are concerned about being sued, right?
Absolutely.
They're concerned about the liability. So that shies them away from...
Not only being sued, but some of them fear being arrested and being criminalized for providing basic abortion care. And that's unfortunate. Having safe abortions, people have forgotten how terrible it was before we had safe abortion care. We were losing women. We were, those coat hanger images are still very...
Well, they're coming back.
Yes. Unfortunately, they're coming back.
Let's move on to education and
Absolutely.
childcare specifically as it relates to that. How would childcare impact education, or what's your take on that?
Having safe and adequate child care, affordable child care, is sort of the key to families being stable. It also helps to start the education process for children. It helps in so many different ways, and is pertinent to our children getting a head start moving forward. It's very difficult to concentrate in any type of job or work if you're worried about your children, right? If you're worried about little toddlers and not being able to go to work and do what you need to do. Childcare is so expensive, and a lot of times it's cost prohibitive. Anytime you're paying $300, $400, $500 a week, we're going to have to figure out how to absorb these costs and make sure that people are able to go to work and their children will be safe in safe environments. It's a major concern. One of the things is I used to be a flight attendant years ago, and I still have friends all around the globe, and in a lot of countries they don't have to worry about this. Child care is included, health care is included, paid time off while your children are under a year old is included in their citizenship. We could do something like this as well. We could do better by families, period.
So in that same area, but slightly different, what about feeding our children and talking about farm and agriculture and how that may have an impact, or how you may have an impact on that area, and that also segues into climate change?
Yes. Well, right now, let's talk about what's immediately on the table is the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is being held up because of some folks that some legislators that wants to balk about the fact that SNAP is included in that. And that's just putting food on the table for people that need it. That's also connected with farmers as well. The Farm Bill itself is extremely, extremely important because it takes into consideration farming in various climate issues. Farmers are under a lot of stress, and sometimes there's drought, sometimes there's environmental issues, the water issues that are not safe and things like that for farming. We have to be better at supporting our farmers because it's hard work. It's extremely hard work, and the farmers are feeling the brunt of that. What people don't realize, and this is how my clinical psychology lens comes in on it, is that farmers are committing suicide at 3.5 times the rate as the regular population. It's just so intense of work, and the failure rate and the possibility of failing and not being able to feed your own children or pay your own bills is very, very high. It's not a stable thing, and we need to support farmers and make sure their lives remain stable no matter what the weather conditions, no matter what comes up for them, that we are supporting them because they are the basis for our food. They protect our food. They grow our food. They are so important to our lives that we have to make sure we're important, that they're important to our lives as well. And pass that Farm Bill. Pass the Farm Bill. It provides insurance. It provides training for future farmers. It provides so much. And they deserve to have those supports and even more.
Well, related to that is also climate is impacting migration. And we have immigration reform and border security as a top priority for many, many individuals in Washington, D.C. What is your stance on what needs to happen to assist with immigration and our border security?
Those are issues that are intertwined quite a bit. Border security, of course we need to protect our borders and make sure that people that are not safe for us to come over, but for the most part, most of the people that are here in the United States are doing well by the United States. They're working hard. They are helping the economy. They are an integral part of what's happening here. As a global society, looking forward, we're with the major climate change issues. You're going to have droughts, you're going to have floods, you're going to have issues around the globe, and people are going to have to migrate. As a world group, we're going to need to get together and figure out who can take in who and how and in the most humane way possible, because people are people and they need safety and they need food and they need to be able to survive no matter what. So globally, we've got to have these conversations because of the environmental changes. Here in the United States, we've got to make our process smoother. We've got to make it faster. We've got to have more judges. They want more border security. But we have to make sure we realize that people are people, and most people don't want to leave their homes. So we have to understand that if they're leaving their homes, some of them are going through deserts and very bad, dangerous situations to get to the United States. That's happening for a reason. I think we should also help them to figure out, we need to figure out why are they having to leave the safety of their own communities, their own towns, and try to figure out how we can help them stay where they are. Make sure their lives are good there as well. And I think Kamala Harris had started that process, and immigration and migration had decreased. And we just need to continue that path to go to where they live and figure out, okay, what's the problem here? Is it more jobs? Is it more, what do you need here? How can we help? And help facilitate things in their community so they can stay home, because most people want to stay home.
Well, and that feeds into the foreign policy and national security topic of how we can work with these other countries. So what is your perspective on the job that you can do in Washington that would directly impact citizens of Indiana in this area of foreign policy and national security?
Well, right now, for one, I think we've got to quit using immigrants as a political pawn. I think that they're not letting out people from insane asylums to come over here and eat our pets and that sort of thing. I think that when you have put that ugliness behind, those ugly conversations behind migration or people that are immigrants, you are developing an under-society that are vulnerable to exploitation, to trafficking, to being paid wages that are so low that it's not right. Just put it that way. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to keep making this just politicizing this for the next campaign or next election, but finding systematic, strategic, very humanistic ways of dealing with people coming over. Of course, we need checks and balances to make sure that we're not accepting people that are going to be dangerous to our society. But even the drug issues, for example, 80% of those arrested for trafficking drugs over the border have been American citizens. So this conversation about people bringing drugs over the border, we've got to look at ourselves first and foremost. What are we doing to perpetuate these issues and resolve those as well?
So what are your priorities? We've talked about a lot of ground here. So what if you could name like a top couple issues that you're extremely concerned about that you would tackle first? There's a lot to do.
There's a lot to do. But the underpinning of a lot of the issues we're having is probably campaign reform, campaign finance reform. Anytime you have millions and millions of dollars flooded into some of these campaigns, you're not getting legislators that are representing the people, but they're representing those big donors, those big corporate donors. This is the reason why we're getting some of the problems. We're having some of the problems that we're having, and the reason why some things aren't fixed. The majority of Americans, for example, supported Roe v. Wade. The majority of American people wanted student loans to be forgiven. The majority of American people didn't want assault rifles to be in our communities. The majority of American people want wages that make sense. However, because of the big money lobbyists, that money that flows into these campaigns, we're not getting the representation for the people. So that's a priority. Ethics in our judiciary system, in our Supreme Court, needs to be a priority. These are things that have come up. There was like this should not have had to be a campaign focus, but it is now. We have to look at the the ethical concerns of our Supreme Court, for example. But the things that are important to me as well, we have to make sure we codify Roe v. Wade. Mm-hmm. We have to make sure that women's rights to choose are in our Constitution. It has to be there. France is doing it. They codified it. They enshrined it into their Constitution. We can do the same. That's the number one priority. Then also education. We have to get these voucher systems out of our education and really invest in our public school systems. It's the best the United States has to offer is our public school systems, and we need to get back to supporting that full force and stop funneling money to the rich so they can send their kids to public school, private schools. So if I had to make a priority, those would be it.
Let's talk a little bit about small business and support for small businesses. So for the last, say, decade or so that I've been watching this number, an extremely high amount of jobs. In fact, I think it's 85%, 80 to 85% of all new jobs come from companies that are less than 5 years old.
Yes.
And so how would you harness that number and help encourage further entrepreneurship?
Right. We need to support new businesses. We also need to give them the training and the backing. One of the problems with a lot of new businesses is that they're underfunded, and sometimes being underfunded is worse than being not funded at all. And we also have to have a safety net so that if those small businesses fail, which most of them do in the first go around, they shouldn't have to be totally devastated. So we need some protections for those entrepreneurs so they don't fall into these pits and never can get out of financial stress again. So young entrepreneurs, if they don't have a family with legacy money to sort of bail them out of these situations, it's very, very, they're very vulnerable to a lot of the ills that happen when you have a business. So we just need more supports, more training, more financial support so they can try, and if it doesn't work, so they can try again. And usually they learn from each time, and suddenly you have these very successful businesses. And that's what America's all about. So that's what we need to help support.
During this conversation, I've heard you say the word safe or safety, I think 3-4 times.
Okay.
So to me, that indicates, just in a general psychological way, that you're very concerned about mental health because of wanting people to be safe and feel safe and have a sense of security. Having said that, is that indicative of the type of senator you would be for the state of Indiana with that type of focus?
Yes. As someone who's on the front lines, and everything I look at, they're not numbers to me. I'm looking at how does it affect the well-being of the everyday person? How does this affect, the rates of suicides in farmers? I mean, how do these policies affect them, the people themselves, and not necessarily the crops or, the Dow Jones average or whatever? How is it affecting the people? Because the bottom line is that I don't care how wealthy a nation is, if their mental health is not, if we're not mentally healthy, it doesn't mean anything at all. So making sure that people are balanced and happy and feel safe and secure, and they're not always struggling. Because when people are always struggling, there's physical health issues as well, high blood pressure and heart attacks and strokes and all kind of things that can happen when you are when you're mentally under stress, not to mention, mental health episodes. I mean, it can take you into a mental health crisis. So taking care of people, making sure that our policies are considering what happens to real life, everyday people.
So how would you humanize those laws? How could that happen where certain policies and laws and connect that with the ripple effect and the impact of someone who is us or lives next door or in our community or is in a another socioeconomic situation where people can understand that direct impact. How is that possible?
Everything is so connected, but for example, when we have people that are in poverty, they're under a lot of stress. You're talking about more mental health issues. You're talking about school issues for the children because they're moving around a lot. Everything is connected. You're talking about physical issues, hunger. You're talking about putting themselves in dangerous situations because they might get into a criminal activity. All these things are connected to a safe economic base. If you have a safe economic base, then all of the mental health issues kind of are, how to say it, they are manageable. We can manage those other things that are happening if we can manage those economic issues.
I wrote down earlier when you said breathable wage. So which policies would you introduce or support from the Harris-Walz ticket that would help Hoosiers?
The Harris-Walz, they have the infrastructure bill that has gotten a lot of people back to work. There's a lot of things coming down the line. There are also broadband allowances too. One of the things, this is a mental health thing, I'm going to turn it back to here. As we get broadband out to the rural communities, for example, that could open us up to some other medical and mental health facilities as well. Say, for example, if we have telehealth for mental health, telehealth programs, that means that, and you need broadband to do some of these Zoom calls and these Zoom meetings and therapy sessions, or you need broadband to transfer, medical records or whatever. You need broadband to be able to do some of these things. The Harris bill also includes a lot of support for broadband. It includes infrastructure issues. It includes a lot. It also includes, I'm drawing a blank here. It just includes a lot moving forward. I think it could go further. And I'm looking forward to working to get even more supports in the Senate for just everyday working people. They're doing a lot, but I'm drawing a blank actually because I'm tired now.
I know it's getting late, but also if we have any questions,
yeah, let's open it up for questions. Give me
in the chat. I see something. So. If there are any questions, please put those in the chat. We can access those. So why are you running? It takes a lot to run for office. I so respect anyone who's willing to do this, especially women. What passion of running do you bring to the ticket?
What I bring to the ticket is that frontline view of what's happening in our communities. Being a psychologist, that's what I do. I'm crisis, been dealing with people with mental health and crisis issues. But I realize too that you can't keep dealing with these issues after 25, 30 years of doing this. To keep trying to do these things one crisis at a time, it makes more sense to me to go to Washington to help to develop policies such that we can deal with the poverty issues, the housing issues, the drug issues, the mental health issues, women's health issues. If we dealt with these things from a legislative, from a Washington, D.C., if we write policy that makes sense, we don't have so many crises at the bottom. I think I'm uniquely qualified for this at the moment, mainly because as a psychologist, I am at the front lines. I understand I'm not removed from these situations. And I think that's really needed right now. Someone who understands policy, someone who understands research, someone who understands science, someone who understands how these policies affect the well-being and the mental health of people on a day-to-day basis.
I assume that you've heard some pretty impactful stories around the state as you've been campaigning, and then also throughout your career as you've worked in different institutions and organizations as a clinical psychologist. Can you share any of these impactful stories that are helping fuel your passion for running for Senate?
Oh gosh, there's thousands and thousands and thousands. There's thousands, but let's talk about women's issues. And I'll tell you one case in particular. A woman that had been violently raped by someone. And she thought she was fine. She was raising this child.
As a result of the rape?
As a result of the rape. She thought she was fine. And these are some things I want people to really consider. It's not just cut and dry. She thought she was fine. She was raising this young man until he hit puberty. And his voice deepened, and he started to look just like his dad. Started to look like the rapist. She was no longer able to be even in the same room with her teenage son. He frightened her. His voice frightened her. She was afraid of him, and he had no idea why. When we're dealing with women and rape and all these things, it's more complicated than what people think. And anytime we don't really delve into what does that look like when we force a woman who's been raped to carry a baby full term, especially, what does this look like? What is this going to look like down the line? I'm not saying that young man doesn't need to be here. I'm just saying it's more complex than what people think. And we have to understand that and quit trying to make rules, one rule fit all for every case that comes through here. Every woman needs to be heard. Every woman needs to be dealt with in a humane way. And her mental health and her physical health is important. I get stories, all sorts of stories. I mean, the war stories are thousands of those as well. But for some reason, I was thinking about this woman over the last 24 hours and wondering how she was doing now. We worked for quite a while, but
As a patient of yours?
As a case, yes. Mm-hmm.
So in addressing trauma and PTSD and the spectrum of trauma, and knowing that many people have a level of PTSD from the other person running for president, and what that person represents with the negative rhetoric and the insults and making fun of people with disabilities and all of that. How would you address the other side of the aisle? Is it possible to have a group therapy session with the Republicans in the Senate and help them get over their bad choices? What does that look like for you? And I'm saying that and I call it seriously kidding.
I'm a little concerned because there's been, in that particular sector of the Republican Party, and it's not the whole Republican Party, it's that Trump section of the Republican Party.
And those that don't speak up, that concede, who may not be a fan, but desire power more than what's actually right.
Right. The level of chaos coming from Donald Trump, the level of, I think that lends to this sense of mental instability, the meanness, the name calling, the degrading,
Gaslighting?
that, of course, yes. All of that is contributing to a sense of mental instability among all of us, I think. It's like, how much longer can we deal with this? I am a little concerned, actually, because so many people are, it almost feels like a cult at times. Because these are not behaviors you would accept out of any other human being. You would not accept this from your child, to lie, to constantly gaslight, to constantly call people names and out of their names, to make excuses. You wouldn't accept that from any other person in your realm of people. Why are they accepting this from Donald Trump? And what really worried me recently was just the other day listening to Tucker Carlson.
Oh.
That was so weird. This daddy's home scenario was pretty scary. So this idea you're going to spank a 15-year-old vigorously, I think that was the phrase he uses.
Yeah,
it had such undertones of abuse and incest, and it was just ugly. And this daddy's home idea, and people were clapping and laughing, and I was thinking, this has gotten pretty sick here. If this is what the Republican Party, or that arm of the Republican Party, stands for, this is dangerous, and we need to really keep an eye on it. Mm-hmm. And it's really it's becoming very sick.
Yeah. So we have a question about how you will deal with the pressure to devote so much money to military spending, especially to building nuclear weapons. How would you address military spending and recommendations for its allocation?
You know, we always want to be the strongest country, and our military is strong, and our weaponry is above and beyond, and we want to stay that way, of course, because we want to be leaders in the world. But we also don't want to be part of the aggression and a part of the annihilation of groups of people. That's not what we need to be as a nation, to defend our country and defend countries that are not strong enough to defend themselves. That's a position we've taken. However, if it gets to the point where there's an arms race where we're spending money and on arms and not spending money on our education system and not spending money on the people and developing our own infrastructures and our own things here in not only Indiana but across the country, I think our priorities are not in line with what we need to be as people. And so we really need to consider who we are in this world and what is our mission moving forward. I think we're a little bit off mission.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that ties back into that maybe global diplomacy and
yes,
addressing what's happening around the world with
absolutely
a little stronger.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
yes,
thank you so much. If there are any other questions, we could squeeze in one more, but we are ready to call it a night. 8 more days.
8 more days.
Vote.
It's been a long weekend. Please vote. We are all over the state of Indiana. We're up north, down south, down to the border of Indiana, Kentucky, up close to Chicago. We're all over the state, so it's getting a little, but it's invigorating at the same time. We can win this if everyone gets engaged and make sure they get out to vote and take 5 people with them, fill up their car, go vote, and go fill up their car again, and we got this.
Thank you so much for having me this evening. It's been lovely to speak with you.
All right, thank you as well.
Thank you.